Founders Foyer with me, Ashwarya. This foyer is full of conversations. The space where creators, founders, and builders look for all the support and concepts to grow their ideas into products. If you're a deep thinker, you naturally enjoy the intersection of creating something and seeing it come live just as you build. The journey of a product creator and builder cross paths because it's all about finding an audience and shipping projects that resonate with both you and them. So, how do you set foot to build a business around something that you're proud of creating? How do you look at creation as a craft and channelize it with the way that tech world evolves? Let's say hello to one of my favorite creators slash product person, Peter Yang. Peter has spent more than a decade leading teams at Meta, Amazon, Reddit, and recently Roblox. He runs a newsletter community called Creator Economy with over 70K plus folks supporting his work. Peter enjoys sharing tips and humor on how to level up your product and creator skills. Hi, Peter. So good to have you here.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah, and I'm really one of your fans with what you do with creator economy, and there's a lot for us to unpack in this conversation.
Great. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. So let's get started with this notion that I found very specific because you're one of those few folks who equally deep dive into product and creator tracks and sees the curve from both of these journeys. And often, this has always been like two separate tracks in whether it's Twitter or whether it's any social platform, it's always to do with product and then, creator tracks separately. Talk to us about
Mhm.
what led you to see both of these together and especially how did creator economy come into place?
Yeah, I guess I'm really bad at like picking a niche for myself, but I think I started writing creator economy a couple years ago. I was doing my PM job, and I really want to kind of get back into creator space. I realized that building for creators is what I'm really passionate about, helping them make a living
Mhm.
online and put stuff out there. So I just started writing my thoughts and sharing my ideas from working at Twitch and other creator companies, and it seemed to have really resonated with people. So I guess the first takeaway is like, if you want to do something like this, whether you want to be a PM or a creator, like you want to do something that you're intrinsically motivated by, right?
Right.
I think that is even more important than like finding an audience and solving a problem for the audience. Like you want to do something that you yourself want to do over a long term.
Mm.
So that's something that yes, I can just write about product management, or I can only write about creators. For me, like what's interesting is kind of like the intersection of building great products and building creator businesses. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And just as you explained about how it starts with yourself, most often when people ask me this thing about, hey, I want to start a podcast or I want to build a product, there's this immediate jump into, oh, but let me study the market or let me just look into what the community really wants. But they don't really start with the question about, do I enjoy building this or why am I the person to start with this in the first place? So I think in this case, I liked how you said I didn't pick the niche because for the longest time, I think for founders for years, well, like I had to tell people that I'm excited about both creator and product stuff. And both of these come together because what you do is ultimately, build and ship things. And it starts with you. It starts with why you should be the person doing this. So I'm glad you brought both of those points into your journey as well.
Yeah, like I think PMs like to, because we have to write like strategy docs and like make plans for the year, and we like to kind of overthink things and overplan things. And a lot of times, the best way to learn is just to get started, putting stuff out there, putting the reps, and
Mhm.
then look back and see what it really resonated with people, and maybe niche down afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Like just like analysis paralysis is not the right way to go.
Yeah, so true. And this kind of the momentum that it takes to build or ship things because it's very easy when we start talking about it more in ideas or trying to say, oh, like I have to do these 10 things. But once you start putting things out, once you be very scrappy about just completing something and then shipping it, which is like just hitting publish or putting the episode live, I think that really is the momentum that sets you in the path and makes you like go forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think as PMs and a lot of founders listening to this, pretty sure they do that as a part of what they do at work. But, beyond that, it's also like very much of a lifestyle or a mindset kind of a thing, which applies to anything and everything you start doing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, Peter, there's one thing that I would like to pick your brain on because we're talking about how this becomes more of a mindset, and then we have to start looking at things that we are really good at. You often quote about this concept of finding one's zone of genius, which to me it sounds more like how somebody can know what they're really good at and operate at their own strength. So, especially bringing this into the creative aspect, how can you build a creative product career out of knowing you're really good at this and operating from your strength?
You mean from a creator perspective? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you know that this is going to be your zone of genius, or like what
Yeah.
what are the steps you do to perhaps like reflect on that or even find it out in the first place?
Yeah. I see it as a kind of like intersecting Venn diagrams. So there is kind of like what you're really curious about, what you have interest and motivation to explore. And then there is like what you're really good at, right? And you
Mm,
need to have both to kind of like do this creator thing long term. Like I think a lot of people they just look at their track record and what they've done over the past 10 years and they're like, oh, I'm really good at talking about product management in interviews because I've done a lot of done a lot of product management interviews. But like, yeah, I can probably build a business just doing product management interviews, helping people with that. But if I
mm.
just did that every day, I'd probably just like really hate my life, right? So, so you have to
Get drained
pick the
out.
intersection of these two things. Like the
Mm,
other extreme is like, for example, I'm really curious about AI, obviously, and using AI tools.
yeah.
Am I like an AI PhD? No, I'm not. So that's something that I'm really curious about, but don't necessarily have a ton of expertise in. But ideally, you want to find where you're both curious about and you have a ton of expertise in. Like that is the ideal place to be. And if you can make content for years on that niche, right? If you find it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think in some sense, it's also not really, looking out for, oh, this is sort of what the industry is expecting. So, there was this point in time that everybody was talking about starting a product podcast or a product newsletter. And this often leads to a point where people say, oh, but, this is going to be nth newsletter or the nth podcast because there's so much content out there in product. But every time,
Mhm.
people say this, there's also the other leak, which is, but you're not finding out what is exactly the intersection you can bring through because it can be a very different lens of thought. And in your case, it became more like a combination of creator and product space. And I think in somebody else's case, I've seen it's been humor and product. And, like multiple facets of this can evolve because of the intersections that you just brought about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just curious because, I mean, a lot of times there's one thing that once you find out, okay, this is going to be something that's interesting for me. So in your case, it's been AI. What do you think could be the impeding challenges that would help you pick that intersection and start working on? Because you're not really great at AI, or you're not going to be deep diving into that as what a PhD researcher would do, but at the same time you know that this is something that excites you. So what are the steps that you do to understand, okay, like I see like a challenge here and I'm going to address this, and I'm going to build my way around it because I find the most strength in this intersection?
I think oftentimes people learn better from someone who's just like 2 years ahead of them than someone who's
Hmm.
like 10 years ahead of them, right? So with AI, I'm learning myself. I'm using it to solve my own problems. Like I'm using it to
Hmm.
edit my blog posts. I'm using it to summarize meeting notes and other things that I do. And when I figure something out, then I just share it with my audience. And
Right.
oftentimes it turns out that my audience has the same problems too that they want to solve. So yeah, like whenever I get some value out of these tools, I
Mm.
just share it, and chances are some other people will get some value as well. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, like it's more around following your sense of wonder or curiosity and, like just leading the way with that.
Mhm. Yep.
Right.
It's that
Yeah.
kind of like like some of my posts are called Curious Beginner's Guide because I am a curious beginner. I'm not an expert,
Mm.
right? But it's Curious Beginner's Guide. you explain things in a very simple manner that people can understand, and that resonates with a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that's also a significant point that you put through, which is, people enjoy leveling themselves up with somebody who's more like one or two, steps ahead of them than somebody who's just been out there. And perhaps it's more to do with the relatability. So I think that's another fairly significant point that listeners can take in as well. And this often happens with the way that we discover content, or we follow people on socials as well, because you generally tend to do with, oh, like I know this person and this person's done this, and oh, like looks like they're in a very similar league as mine. And then you find it more like, in terms of your thoughts and in terms of your, parallel thinking, you just find it more easier to relate to this person than with, a different set of people.
Yeah, I don't really resonate a lot with folks who position themselves as kind of like
Mhm.
gurus, or like
Oh yeah,
kind of like have all
totally.
these secrets. You know, like I think people should be humble, right? Like we're just like
Mhm.
putting posts out there on social media. Like you're not like I'm not a guru of anything. And that's also part of the reason why I kind of try to use humor, because
Yeah.
sometimes I see some of these cringe posts, and I have to like I have to have an outlet for myself.
Yeah, no, very true. There was this point in time that everybody had this, oh, like I'm an AI thought leader. I'm like a product leader. And I mean, no offense around that, but then I do get your point that, there was this phase when I used to think that, oh, like if people didn't have this air of thought around them, would there be more of a relatability for them with the audience? Because there's clearly like an obstructive way that leads you to not seek this person or seek this sort of thoughts from this person, because you kind of see yourself more far away in the radius than where you should stand, or where you should be with respect to the relatability part. I think the humor is the best defense mechanism in this case, because everybody kind of gets it, and it's also that it's kind of a very harmless way to put the point right. At the same time, it
Mhm.
drives in very, very serious conversation.
A lot of my memes are like, going after like, the feeling of like finally someone put this out there in a funny way. So it has a hint of truth to it, a
Yeah.
lot of times. Yeah.
True, true, true. Like getting hard truths right with a little bit of pain and humor. So
Mhm.
for sure. Now that you mentioned about humor, I really would like to, go deeper into this, because I think memes have just become a very familiar concept thanks to social media. And it all started with sitcoms and these entertainment media stuff, but it's very well become like a sense of communication for even businesses, because we find that a lot of brands now use trending memes or very, very pithy posts that tend to, talk humor. How do you
Mhm.
think more creators can leverage this? Especially, you don't start from a sense of saying, oh, like I am into comedy, like I am a comedian, or you don't have any sort of background there. But at the same time, how do you get started with this, or how do you find your personal rooting with respect to using humor as a sense of way to communicate your thoughts?
Mm. So I think a lot of meme culture is a remixing culture. So usually
Hmm.
what happens is I get inspired by something else, like maybe someone else posts a meme, or someone posts like a really cringe post on LinkedIn, and then I get inspired, and then I kind of remix it, right? Like maybe it's the same meme, but I put
Hmm.
like a different caption onto it, or like I just changed the cringe post into a shit post. Or maybe there's something that happened in my day that kind of like inspired me to crack some jokes about it. Like
Right.
I'm also like posting a lot of memes internally, like where I work, and like people seem to enjoy it. So it's just like another. It's just like yeah. I think you put in the reps, and you kind of remix other things,
Mhm.
and then that's kind of how you kind of post these memes. Yeah.
Right. It's more like a, cushiony start, because it's not like you're creating, something very, very new from the beginning, but you're sort of putting things out, whatever comes to you at the present moment. And it sounds more like a very soft start into it.
Exactly. And I think I think memes are actually like a really great form of communication, right? Because like a meme has a lot of like context and background behind it. A lot of people understand what the meme is about. So
Mhm.
in some ways, it's like a more efficient form of communication than like simple text or images. It comes with a lot of
Yeah.
meaning. Yeah.
Oh, no, for sure, for sure. there's this always this thought around how visual context is the first thing that your brain captures, and all the more when it's going to be constantly coming through because memes carry that sense of virality in them, right? Like they're constantly
Mm,
being exposed to people and over a period of time, and there's this sense of that the urgency and the sense of continuously looking at it for the longest period of time. So yeah, in that sense, it definitely makes a great communication medium for folks to get into. And
exactly.
it's to me, when you mentioned about how it's more like remixing or rejigging, it's also like a sense of saying that you show up, you kind of constantly keep sharing without looking at it more from the outcome perspective. Because I have seen in cases where people are extremely, they're great with putting things out, but they're also like, oh, but that didn't land well, or this wasn't humor enough for people to resonate with it. So do you get better at constantly being showing up, or how is it for you in your journey? Like how where did you think that you really got this sense of oh, like I could use humor as a vehicle for what I was doing?
Yeah, so I think like product managers have output and input metrics, right? Like output metric is like revenue, and input metric is like conversion rate of your onboarding page or something. And
Yeah.
similarly, creators have the same thing. Like output is like maybe how much money you make or how many followers you have, and input is like how many posts you put out, right? So for me,
Mm,
I've been doing this for a while, and I still get surprised sometimes when like a random thing out there, you know, 30 minutes trying to craft, like that doesn't reach an audience. So now I think the right mindset is just to my mindset right now is just to I want to put content out there every day. Like I want to have a streak where I have content
right.
out every single day, and I don't want to miss that streak. I don't actually focus too much anymore on like what goes viral or like what happens.
Mm,
I mean, sure, I'll look at back after a week or a month and do some analysis,
yeah.
but generally speaking, I found that as long as you can be consistent over a long period of time,
Mm,
like good things will generally happen. You know?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And I personally believe in the same thing as well. It's a lot to do with how consistent can you get with the value that you're putting out. And I'm so glad that this is one point that I usually tend to take away from most conversations that happen on the podcast, because it's kind of very easy to for people to look at anybody's work and say, oh, like that went viral, or this was really trending there. But the amount of effort that would go behind for that one particular post or one particular thought to go viral would have been like months or years of work. So it's really good that this point keeps coming up in different junctures in the conversation, that consistency and showing up is more way more important.
Yeah, just put stuff out there. Like don't like put do month and years of work of putting stuff out there. Don't spend months
Mm.
putting one tweet out there, right? Don't yeah, putting the reps.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And pretty sure that this particular portion is definitely going to be resonating with a lot of PMs, because I think if there's one thing that's uniting all of us, it's a little bit of pain and how humor goes in through the pain. So, I can't wait for PMs to listen to this particular segment of memes and product building.
Great.
Right. Cool. So we're talking about how both PM and creator tracks can come together. And you've personally worked with creator communities over the last many years, and in terms of both building creator products and also enabling creators to make revenue and grow their business. So what's your outlook on creator success? So how do you think, for somebody who's as novice and somebody who's been in this market, who's built a business out, how can both of these people look at success from their own lenses?
I think just let's take a step back, right? Like I think generally
Mhm.
speaking, success overall, I think as well, I guess as an Asian immigrant, right? Like you kind of have a lot of expectations from your parents and from society on the right
Mhm.
way to succeed. Like you gotta go climb the ladder. You gotta go become like an executive. You gotta manage a lot of people. And I think a lot of times it's the people who kind of failed early on in their career and like failed on that path that actually
Mhm.
end up succeeding. For example, I've been reading this book from Noah Kagan, who he got fired from Facebook. Like he lost out on billions of dollars as like the number 30th employer or something. But
Mm,
now he's like succeeded. He's built like a bunch of businesses for himself. He has like a best-selling book. So I think you want to define success on your own terms, right?
right.
And for me, success is about doing what I want to do with my time and also talking to people that I want to talk to. It's not kind
Mm,
of like it's kind of like having control over my own time. That
right.
that to me is success. Time is a lot more valuable than money, in my opinion. Um,
Mm,
and that could be, at my PM job, building great products, working with engineers and designers, or it can just be, with my creator stuff, like putting a meme out there or like writing a blog post, right?
right.
So that's I think a lot of PMs, a lot of tech people don't realize this, and they're in this rat race,
Mm,
and I think it's not healthy to be in this rat
yeah.
race. So, sorry, maybe I didn't answer your question directly, but I,
No,
I
you
wanted to
did.
make
You
that point.
kind of did. No, that's really the point that I would take as something that goes with the question, because it's like, even to understand that it takes like a personal sense to get through or decide what you really want out of the success is going to take a lot many years for many people. And for somebody who's listening to this, they might have thought from the lens of, oh, like I can't get to like X number of like followers on socials or a certain revenue budget. While all of those are like different steps to getting through to the success, I think the ultimate part is to be able to decide how you really want this to be. And where especially with the time part that you said, right, like how do I control the kind of scope that I have to work, or how do I have like a direct purview of things that I would like to take upon at this phase in my life, or at this point in
Yeah,
time. So yeah, that sounds more reasonable.
yeah, you could be if you're not careful, like if you just do the career
Hmm.
path, you could be in a worse rat race than working at a tech company, right? Like a lot of
Yeah.
YouTubers are burning out because they have to put out a video,
Mm,
or they have a niche that they don't actually enjoy. They put out a video every week. So
yeah.
you always want to check yourself. Like, which game are you playing? Is the game enjoyable or not?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very self-reflective point, I would say. And I mean, talking on this lens, with you, one thing that I find is you've spent a lot more time with yourself, like reflecting on what's really ticking for you, as from running a creator economy or whether it's your day job. At the same time, it's you've also spent a lot of time around creators, like meeting fellow folks, and you also like
Mhm.
talk to product people, just like how I do with you. So were there like interesting takeaways you've had from talking to fellow creators, looking at success from their lens? Like it's not to do to say I'm going to copy this person's route or person's path, but more like, hey, like I've never looked at it from this lens, and it's kind of very interesting for me. Have you ever had that kind of a purview from somebody who's been your peer or somebody who you've spoken to?
Yeah, I think one of the best parts about being a creator is you get to meet a lot of other great creators and product leaders, right?
Mm,
Like, I met people that I would never met in real life without doing this. And I think one thing you realize is that they all have different paths to success. Some people succeed on LinkedIn, some people succeed on YouTube. So it's nice to study how they succeeded, right? And
right.
there's actually a really good blog called Growth in Reverse, written by this
Mm,
lady who actually she like she
yes.
kind of like breaks down how
Chanel
each
was,
creator is.
yeah, right.
Chanel, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
really like
So
the newsletter too. Yeah.
yeah, so she puts in a ton of work and breaks things down. But again, going back to our early point, you don't want to have analysis paralysis. Maybe you spend a couple hours doing
Mm,
this, but ultimately
mm.
you want to put stuff out there yourself and see how people react to it, and like start putting in those reps. Don't don't spend like a month just trying to learn how other people succeeded, because your journey will be different. Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Cool. So it's like when you observe other creators or founders, there's also one interesting aspect for me, which I've personally seen in your journey as well, which is to learn how to package value, because as product managers in our everyday job, we kind of talk about how branding and packaging is going to be very crucial for a product to sell in the market. So same thing that goes with understanding what kind of value you put through. I've seen that in your case, the way that you've packed the value of newsletter and your course, and the way community has been built around it, is looking at it more like how do you keep accruing value and how do you keep adding and expanding this. So can you talk to me about, like, did you plan this through, or like how was it for you to look at the way that value was growing, and how do you see this sustaining in terms of a community approach?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what I'm doing most of the time. So, but I think a couple of things. So yeah, so I've done the newsletter, I've done the course.
Hmm.
I've even like when I started the creator stuff, I actually wrote a PM book, and it's still you can still go buy it on Amazon, right? So I'm trying
Yes.
to. So again, it goes into experimenting with different things. I wouldn't
Mhm.
recommend writing a book when you're starting, but experimenting different things, and then kind of like thinking about what actually gives me energy. The thing that I've been able to sustain for the most longest time is the newsletter, because I actually enjoy
Right.
sitting down and putting a piece out there. The course I
Mhm.
tried a couple times. I'm not sure I enjoy kind of like talking about PM for 6 hours every weekend. Like I'm not sure I can sustain that. Maybe I can change into like an on-demand course at some point.
Yeah.
Um, but again, it goes back to into what gives you energy. So I don't have a grand strategy. I do make plans and I do try different things
Mhm.
and see what works. Yeah. So I guess if you want to say if I have a strategy, it's about trying different things. And if something starts working, then kind of like doubling down more on it, especially if I enjoy
Right.
doing that thing. Yeah.
Right. So I think the
Mm.
packaging of value is more to do with like how much of an energy can you keep increasing, and how much does, finishing something really leaves you with, as from an enthusiasm, as from an energy perspective. So measuring
Yeah.
the packaging more from an energy perspective. Yeah, that sounds cool.
I think
And
I think
I don't
another
know
thing
how.
I'll say, just another point I want to
Mhm.
make is like, I obviously still have a full-time job that I'm proud of, and also like have kids, right? So like I think how I found to make the creator thing work is you can create one piece of content. So my newsletter is like the hub of my content.
Right.
You create one piece of content, and then you can spread that content across many different areas. Like you can put it on different social networks. Maybe you can upload a
Mm.
video about it. So that kind of requires less, kind of like original thinking from me, right? Like I only I don't have to create 6 pieces of content. I can create one piece and then like modify it and put it in other places.
Yeah. And I think doing that also helps you grow your thinking horizon, because what probably you learn from writing a long blog or an article is kind of very different from what you do the same way with recording a video, as opposed to, let's say, a podcast and then a tweet. So at each point in time, I think this piece of thought that you carried with is just going to keep growing. So at least in my case, I've often found that after about a month of ruminating on a topic, or like talking to somebody like this and then trying to create pieces of content through it, there's only like expansion of where I started from. It's like by the end I kind of feel that, oh, like there are so many different perspectives for me to take in. And it's also nice when the community is giving you feedback, inputs. So at the end, I think it's a very healthy game, because you start with more than, I mean, you left with more than you start with. So it's kind of always like a very infinite sum game for you to play. So yeah.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And to me, when you said energy, it sounded very, very surreal, because when people used to talk to me about like how do you find time between day job doing a lot of other things, there's this one small change that I made personally in my life, which is to
Mhm.
start measuring things from the angle of energy more than time and space. Like try to think about how much does this activity give me energy, like does it leave me feel energized or does it leave me feel drained. Just trying to say yes and no to things based on energy has had a very, very tremendous effect on you growing as a person, and also the quality of work that you put out. So I was so glad when you mentioned energy as a point, because not everybody gets it from that lens. So yeah, like kudos to you.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. It took me years to realize this, but I think the earlier you realize this, the better. Like
Yeah.
listen to yourself and what gives you energy, as opposed to listening to other people. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally, totally. Yes. On with you there. Awesome. So I think this part is something I really want to ask a lot of creators and personally like product builders that I enjoy working with, because there's always this obsession. We spoke about how social media is pushing people to be who they're not, and like there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of burning out. There's this obsession to become the next best someone, like when it's product, it's like, oh, I would like to be like Shreyas, I would like to be like Lenny, I would like to be like Peter, I would like to be like X and Y. And there's this focus on popularity and immediate metrics, like trying to say, I put this out, so what's the outcome do I get? And somewhere I think create being a creator or creatorship is also pushing people to do this. So in your case, were there like things that you were able to discover about yourself, more like hidden truths, hidden potential that you didn't know existed? Instead of becoming the next best someone, it's like you became the best version of yourself. So were there like a few things that you discovered in this journey?
Let me think. I think you're gonna fail if you just try to become like the next best traders or the next best Lenny. Like each person is unique,
Yeah.
and like again, the best niche you can build for yourself is a niche with your name, right? Like
Hmm.
like if people think Lenny or people think Shreyas or people think me, like that's best niche. Then your name becomes the niche as opposed to anything else. But I also think it's about, again, it's about like let's go back to the product management side of things. It's
Hmm.
about thinking about what you personally really value as opposed to what society or the expectation is for you to value, right? Like for example, I'm not anywhere close to being a vice president of product, right? But like what I really value is just building really great products. Like
Right.
I want to, everything that I deliver, I want to be proud of, and I want to
Hmm.
exceed customer expectations. And I think that's part of why
Right.
I'm in this creator space, because building for creators, they're very vocal, they're very active on social media as well.
Hmm.
So like if you build something really good for them, they will like share their light, they will tweet about it. And that gives me a lot of joy, you know?
Energy.
So like yeah, like am I a top whatever 1% product manager or whatever? Like how do you even measure what top 1% is? All I know is that when I deliver products, I want it to be really good quality
Hmm.
and really delight customers, and I'll do whatever it takes to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think at each point, kind of discovered that something new about you or something that's just coming up is leading you towards that vision. So it's kind of nice to start with really understanding what you want to stand for, what you want to feel proud about in terms of your work. And somewhere when you said that, I could like really vibe with building craftful products, because it's really what you know, kind of pulled into or just eventually getting into. So yeah,
Yep.
I think that makes sense. Cool. So yeah, there's one strong take that I know you kind of share about, which is how building prototypes and sort of putting or showing up work is significantly better than creating slides or trying to wave through something in the name of showing up. So
Yeah.
is this only in terms of conveying vision, or like how did you end up having this opinion? I'm more curious to learn the inner sides to it.
I mean, I think the product management function has kind of devolved over the years, especially at like larger
Tell
companies,
me about it.
where like a lot of my peers, like they just spend all day long like making slides for exec meetings and like going through like multiple reviews. And like when I ask them like, hey, have you talked to a customer today? They're like, no, I don't have time to talk to customers. I'm making
Hmm.
slides, or like I'm trying to get internal alignment on something,
Right.
right?
Right.
So let's go back to the basics. Like the basic understand, identify, execute loop, right? Like you have to go freaking talk to customers and
Mhm.
like try to internalize, try to be the customer to even know what the hell your vision or strategy is, right? Like you can't just make it up. Even if you get like all the execs aligned, it could be the wrong thing. So that's why I think like I would like to see PMs spend less time on intermediate work, like making up
Mhm.
the perfect 6 pager or like a strategy deck or whatever, and actually, yeah, talk to customers and and spend their time on customer facing stuff. Like for example, like
Hmm.
copy that a customer sees in your product actually really matters. Probably matters a lot more than your strategy deck. You know.
Yeah.
So so that's why I think, yeah, if PMs can actually work with design or work with engineering or even with using AI, get to
Mhm.
prototype as soon as possible and show that stuff to customers and get a reaction from customers. To me, that's a much better use of time than like spending all this time on influence with authority or internal alignment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sad that in most cases, at least, we've seen in reality how the vision or like the strategy is often the culmination with the leadership team, and it's never stepping out from there into what the customers should actually think about or what the customers have as a narrative in their head about your product. So yeah, very true. But at the same time, I think it's more like a sword with two sharp edges, because at the other side of it, it's somewhere having to go through that internal alignment to even arrive at, let's say, putting your point out, which is like, let's say you have a good prototype and you would like to show that to the company, to the team, and to kind of get a yes from all of them. Most
Mhm.
often there are cases in different teams where it kind of goes through a very hierarchical way, and then you are not able to get your way out, and you're not able to put things through. So I mean, like, while the actual case is going to be like looking at customers and going through it, the sad reality is also sometimes that you have to wade through the internal misalignment. And most often, yeah, PMs are at loggerheads because they have to face at both the ends.
Yeah, internal alignment is important. And, it comes down to incentives, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's kind of a reality, unfortunately, that in your performance review, like customers don't really
Yeah.
have a voice. It's the internal stakeholders that have the voice. I guess the way I've kind of got around some of that is just to, like, you can build a creator brand online, but you can also build a personal brand in a company.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
for me, I always want to be one of the most kind of customer obsessed PMs in the company,
Right.
right? And kind of build
Right.
that culture.
Hmm.
And if you're working at a good company, like the
Hmm.
execs will recognize that
Hmm.
and support you in kind of building
Hmm.
that call culture. So yeah, so I guess make sure make sure you work at a company that shares your values, like customer obsession,
Yeah.
and then you're also more likely to succeed that way.
Yeah. And also, like, build a story around what you want to stand for. I think it reminds me of the case when somebody said, when you start working for a team, like, have this kind of a about me doc where it's not just going to talk about what stuff that you've done. It's mostly to do with, hey, like, this is who I am, this is what excites me, and my archetype is like, I really obsess about ABC. And then, like, have this kind of expectation that others can look up to you for something, because this is what you stand for. So have that sense of story, everybody can narrate or relate to you with.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and also really important to. I mean, right now it's a really tough jobs market, but I do really
Yeah,
think it's really important to find companies that share your values. Otherwise,
absolutely.
you're going to a bad situation that you're not going to enjoy. You know. So
Yeah, yeah. No, very true. And it sort of sits well with something that we just spoke a few minutes ago, which is what really drives you as a person. Like, are you somebody who likes to take control of your set of things? Are you somebody who obsesses over certain, little details? So it's also a lot to do with how you reflect of what you want to stand for, and choose companies or choose career or creator paths that would leave you do your best, and like, not otherwise.
mhm, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Cool. Right. Awesome. So there's one last piece that I would like the audience also to leave with, which is to dig a little into your AI experiments. And there's one specific thing that I'm also excited about, because whatever expansion that AI from software or from business or personal productivity lens is happening, it's a lot to do with GPT and a lot of other tools and techniques that have come around it. But aside from those outcomes, I would like to understand the psychological aspect of it, which is, how can AI augment the way we think more from, visualizing or training one's own LLM of sorts? Because there's so much potential in this space. And as somebody who's, been equally excited like me in this space, what's something that you have as a thought in terms of training one's own LLM?
Yeah, I haven't quite figured out how to train my own LLM yet. but but I'll share something with your audience that has really saved me a lot of time. Like
Hmm.
OpenAI launched GPTs, right? And like I made all these GPTs for myself.
Hmm.
And like they're not public GPTs, they're just like private GPTs that I made for
Right.
myself. And a GPT is basically like a way to save like a really long prompt.
Hmm.
And yeah, they've saved me a lot of time. So I can quickly walk through some of the GPTs that I have, right? So like the first one that I made for myself is called Concise GPT. So all it does is like
Okay.
I paste in some like draft and it tries to
Hmm.
make it more concise and it gives me like three variations of the output. And like I
Okay.
use it all the time to clean up my blog posts, clean up PRDs, and like, even clean up like updates that I put in Slack. Like it's really good at, kind of making it more concise.
Rule of three. It's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Mhm. So that's one. Another one I use for my newsletter. I kind of copy and pasted in a bunch of like popular newsletter posts, and then it's really good. So then when I write a draft newsletter, I copy the drafting, and then it spits out like another version, right? And I don't copy
Hmm.
that version directly, but like I use that AI version to clean up my own draft. Like sometimes
Yes.
it is, yeah, expresses sentences in a better way.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's really, really super useful. Another one is to generate headlines for my blog posts.
Mm.
A lot
Right.
of this stuff, like I've kind of copy and pasted my own content in there, and that's why
Hmm.
it's kind of like a personal LLM that kind of like writes to my style.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the last one that I use sometimes is like I have like a private coach, because I'm too cheap to pay for a real coach. So I have a private coach GPT that has like, here are my goals, here's kind of like my current situation, give me
Right.
advice. And yeah, if you use the voice feature, especially, it does feel like a
Hmm.
private coach. Like it will give you advice and like share really good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, like those are like really great ideas to start with, and especially the coach part, because a lot of us, I feel right now, the way we are, it's kind of nice to have somebody listen to a lot of these unprocessed thoughts that we've had. And, most times it's easier to write them in, but at times it's very hard to put them into words. So those
Yeah.
rumbles and those loose thoughts that keep running in your mind, if you can just process that audio and have like a very sophisticated way of like streamlining that, I think sounds so great, and I can't wait to try that out.
Yeah, you should. It's like, AI is like the most patient listener out there. Like it will just keep listening to you talk and try to summarize things. So yeah, you should definitely try it out.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Such great ideas to start with. So yeah, I hope for the folks who are listening and as well as me, I'm very, very excited to go back and try some of these with ChatGPT.
Mhm. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So Peter, thank you so much for being here today. I think this whole conversation was amazing because finally I got to talk about the very similar things that excite me as well personally, which is to do with shipping out projects as a creator, as well as being in the PM hat, wearing that lens, and then trying to look at things from a traditional product building mindset. So it was nice to have you share your lessons and what you've been through in your journey. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was an awesome time. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Thank you.